I just texted Melissa because she texted me like 5 minutes ago. So I just thought maybe she might have her phone handy.
So is she coming?
I don't know. I haven't heard back. I literally just texted her.
Okay, thank you.
2:00.
Hi, everybody. This is Andrew. I am here, and I apologize. I'm a bit under the weather. I have chills and all that fun stuff. So
Yes.
I'm going to power through, but bear with me if I'm a little slow or coughing.
It's all right. I am also sick. I'm getting over a nasty case of COVID. So yeah, that's why I didn't come to the board meeting Monday. I couldn't talk. I was like, there's no point in sitting there looking like death and not talking. So
we are live right now. Kathy, I don't know if you wanted to at least get it started and just state on the record that we're waiting for a quorum. And Tamara, do you want me to start calling some of the board members?
Melissa just responded. She thought it was at 4:00.
So is she going to be able to make it?
I'll let you know in a second.
Okay.
Oh, now she's calling me. Hold on. Hello?
How much is a quorum?
2.
We need one more person to attend.
Okay.
All right. Well,
I'm going to call Brittany myself, so it'll be a minute.
okay. So welcome to the Livermore Amador Valley Transportation Authority. This is the Finance and Administration Committee meeting on September 19th, 2022, and the time is 2:00, and we are waiting to get a quorum, so bear with us.
Okay, Melissa's coming.
Great.
She'll be popping in as me though, because I just sent her my link, but that's all right. We know who she is.
I can fix that when she comes in.
Okay, and I'll go ahead and say that this meeting is going to be conducted via teleconference in accordance with Government Code Section 54953C2 in order to protect the health and safety of staff, officials, and the general public. And we are all remote in various locations today. Hey, Melissa. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, sorry. I'm having our internet was down all morning long. We just got it, literally just got it back.
Wow. Okay, well, I think it's going to be you and me, so we're going to go ahead and start. And I'm going to call the meeting to order. And if you could take roll, please.
Yes, Director Hernandez.
Present.
Vice Chair Kick is not present. Chair Narum.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. So at this time, I'll open the meeting to the public for items that are not on today's agenda. And do we have either any comment cards or speakers?
So there are no attendees in this meeting today, and I did not receive any comments via email.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll move on to the minutes from August 23rd, 2022. And I'll look for a motion to approve. It's going to be you and me, Melissa.
I will go ahead and move the minutes for the 23rd.
I'll second it. And can we have roll call, please?
Yes, Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Vice Chair Kick is absent. Chair Narum.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great. So let's move on to agenda item number 5, the treasurer's report for August 2022.
Okay, so this is the treasurer's report for August of 2022. As you can see on the revenue side, we finally got that first big check in. It's normal timing. So our revenues are at 35%, while our expenses are only at about 13%. We have a healthy cash flow in all of the accounts, which is great because the parking garage construction is supposed to start any minute, and that's going to get pricey. So we are prepared for that. And that's it. I'll take any questions.
Melissa, anything?
I have no questions.
Yeah, I don't have any either. It's good news.
Yes.
So let's see, we just need to, do we need a motion for this? I forget.
Yes, please.
Okay,
I'll go ahead and motion the treasurer's report for August 2022.
I'll second it. If we can have a roll call, please.
Yes, Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Vice Chair Kicks absent. Chair Narum.
Aye,
Motion passes.
thank you. So we'll move on to item 6, the pension liability assessment. And turn it over to you, Tamara.
I would just like to introduce Andrew Flynn. He is with Cal Muni. He reached out a few months ago to discuss our pension liabilities, which we've never come up with a policy. We have a great policy for our OPEB, but nothing for our pension liabilities. So he has agreed to help us develop a policy for our pension liabilities. And I asked him to present to the Finance and Administration committees so that we could all have a much better understanding of this. So Andrew, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Again, I apologize. I'm a little bit under the weather, so apologies for my attire. I'm trying to deal with whatever this bug is that is running around my house. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. All right, again, thank you for the opportunity. I do appreciate it. As Tamara mentioned, we're going to be talking about your pension liabilities, how they work, why they work, and with the goal of really kind of setting the strategy for how do we build a policy that's going to be a long-term plan to help the authority manage these liabilities proactively. I'll jump right in very briefly about me. Again, my name is Andrew Flynn. I am with California Municipal Advisors. I have been around public finance my whole career. In fact, my father was a city manager down in Lodi. So again, I've been around this even back in high school. I spent many years as a municipal advisor. I've been on the technology side, building platforms to help public agencies with their finances. And I was also the chief administrative officer for one of the national trust banks. So I covered public finance nationally. So I've looked at issues, big and small, across the nation. Pension is a big one. Again, this is one that we have been dealing with as long as I remember. I remember, back in the late 90s, when CalPERS, offered the 3% at 50, deal. And I remember it being a bit of an issue even then. And it continues to be a challenge. So this is, again, pensions are something that every agency has to deal with. So the question becomes, how do you do it as effectively as possible? So that's really what we're going to focus on today. And as I move through this, feel free to stop me, ask questions. Again, this is meant to be interactive. Oh, that's the other thing I should mention. As an aside, in my evenings, I am elected also. So I understand kind of where you guys are, not just the finance side. So again, happy to dialogue about this. This is a complex topic that even industry professionals get confused on. So I definitely want you to walk away feeling like you have a good grasp of what we're talking about. All right, so this first slide on the left, this is the status of your pension plans as of the most recent CalPERS reports. CalPERS reports come out in June, at the end of June each year. They are done in arrears. So this report says 2021 because they work a year backward. And I can get into why, but suffice it to say, that's the most recent report that comes out. And as you can see, your pension plan is relatively well funded. It's about 88% funded, right? If you look at the whole pie, again, the whole pie is your pension obligation as of 6/30/2021. Now, think about what a pension is. and how this plan from an overarching perspective works. When you negotiate with employees around pensions and you come to an agreement, CalPERS takes those agreements and quantifies it. And they forecast well out into the future. And they say, okay, what does this represent in terms of a liability that the authority is taking on? And then they work backwards through time based upon, investment performance assumptions and obviously, inflation assumptions, all kinds of assumptions. They work backward to say, okay, how much money do you need today? Do you need to be contributing today to fulfill that future obligation? Because again, ultimately, these are obligations of the authority, right, between you and the employees. CalPERS is really here to facilitate the process. So anyway, this whole pie represents the total liability that you've accrued up to 6/30/2021. And the CalPERS assumption is that it is going to grow at the discount rate each year. So the discount rate being the assumed growth rate for investments out into the future, which is 6.8% currently. So think of this whole pie growing at 6.8% in every direction. Now, in so much as you have money with CalPERS, the blue area, ideally, CalPERS is going to invest and earn 6.8%, or heaven forbid, even better. And they take care of the growth of the pie through that. But in so much as you have unfunded liabilities, that red section, not only do you have that liability, that $881,000, you also have to make up the 6.8% growth of that portion of the pie. So you can think of this as debt, right? We'll get into some of the details, but suffice it to say, it's like a mortgage. It amortizes out over time. It has some various structures to it, but you can think of it as debt with a 6.8% interest rate. So it's very expensive. So that's where you are as of this most recent report. And you can see, that you have, again, that 880,000 with another, it's going to, what the remaining liability is going to amortize over about 15 years. Now, we also know that CalPERS announced when they released these most recent reports that they also had a negative 6.1% year, right? Now, again, the assumption is that they need to earn 6.8%. They earned negative 6.1%. So we had a miss of 12.9%. So what we've done is we forecasted that out and said, okay, what does that represent to the authority? And that's what you're seeing in the right-hand side of the slide, is what we forecast in terms of what your plans will look like when the reports come out next year. Now, the reason this is important is because these liabilities, are something that you need to manage proactively. So having a line of sight on what these liabilities are, is really important. And typically you won't see it until the report comes out, which is already a year in the past. So we're trying to get you ahead of the curve. So far, so good. Does it make sense?
Yes.
All right, fantastic.
Yes, it makes sense, but I do have can you go back to the slide?
Oh, please, yes.
So, I mean, in 1 year difference, it's more or less doubled.
Yes.
And if you keep going at that rate, that's kind of fairly something that you think about, like that's kind of, wow, then are we ever going to catch up?
That's the challenge. I would say it's a general rule, and I'll show you here in a minute. CalPERS will have bad years, but typically they are right around the discount rate. So what we just experienced tends to be, an outlier as a general rule. But it does, when you see it, it hurts. It's hard to argue that point. But what I would say is that, again, recognize that the investment strategy of CalPERS, like a 401k, is really looking at the long range. This is a 30-year type of investment strategy. So again, yes, the short-term swings hurt, but what we're trying to do is how do we get the long-term returns over time? But to your point, it hurts to see it.
Okay.
All right, so this next slide really is just a different way of looking at the same thing. So the black section at the top is the current report, and the red section is the forecasted for 2022. And what you see here, I want to call out the 2021 funded percent and the 2022 funded estimate. So as I said, these liabilities evolve over time. CalPERS is going to have good years, they're going to have bad years. Your funded percent is going to change and fluctuate over time, right? The pie is going to grow, but their investment performance is going to change the shape of the wedge, so to speak. So understanding a healthy funded status, this isn't something that we can just say, make it go away, because CalPERS can have a bad year like they just did, and your liability grows. So we need a metric that helps us understand health as a general rule. And we are generally looking, between 85 and 90% to be healthy. And as you can see, in the current report, you're there, right? And I'll go into why, but you're generally there in the current report. But as we drop, into 2022, you can see the miscellaneous, starts to drop below that. And this is where we want to, again, be proactive about managing this, recognizing that, again, you can't just go throw a lot of money at it, right? You have to be very strategic about the dollars that you put into this, and be very thoughtful about the approach, because what we don't want to do is just, be hamstringing the authority, because you have other priorities, right? Pensions are a piece of it, but it's not everything. So this funded percent is going to be a metric that we're going to be focusing in on. Now, what I will also say, though, is that as a rule, ultimately, you need to get to 100%. I'm not saying don't get to 100%. What we're saying is you want to get to 85 to 90% from a policy perspective. And then there are other strategies to manage the gap between that target and 100% that makes the management of this a more robust process and more fiscally sound over time. So, and we'll go into why that is. All right, speaking of investment performance, so what this is a chart that shows you investment performance for all of CalPERS over the last 30 years. The dark blue bars are years where CalPERS performed above the discount rate. The light blue bars are years where they were positive but below the discount rate. And you can see here you got the dot-com crash in 01-02, you got the financial crisis in 08-09, and I guess we would call this the COVID crash. There isn't lingo yet, but something along those lines. You can see this here as well. What I want to call out is this trend over time, right? You can see over a 25-year period, CalPERS was earning 7.2% on average. 20 years at 7.6%. This 15-year number, right? It takes into account the financial crisis and this most recent drop. It's still at 5.9%. Again, their target is 6.8%. So over time, CalPERS does what they're trying to achieve. Again, they're trying to always balance between earning what they need to earn, but also protecting the assets long term, right? This isn't just about maximizing returns, because it creates too much risk. You want to have a balance between safe, secure assets and growth opportunity. So they're always trying to balance that long term. And as a general rule, over time, we can see that they do that. Now, again, we don't know. Does that mean that they're going to do that going forward? No, we don't know. But their performance over time has been pretty consistent. And it's a good way to think about what they are trying to accomplish. They're not just trying to make money. They're trying to balance the risk and return over time for all the plans that they're responsible for. All right, so this is your unfunded liabilities over the last decade. So again, this is that wedge of the pie, that red wedge that is your shortfalls. And you can see over time that you owe about $218,000 more than you did in 2012, which again, I don't worry too much about. It's a relative number, right? The pie fluctuates. But you can see the funded level, the green bar going across, is going up. And because of this most recent report, when CalPERS had a 21.3% year, your funded level is 10.8% higher than it was in 2012, which is fantastic, right? That's what we want. But sadly, we know that this next year is going to be coming, and you're basically going to be back where you were. So again, how do we understand these fluctuations and buffer your general funds over time and build resiliency into this, so that these swings aren't creating drastic pain to the authority over time, because these things can become large liabilities. And the way you can really see that is here in this slide that shows you your payments from 2017 to 2024. So what we're looking at here, the blue bars are your normal payments. So normal payments are the contributions the authority makes for benefits accrued in the current period, right? So these are current employees providing current services to current ratepayers or fee payers, and therefore they're accruing a benefit. And in a perfect world, that normal contribution would be sufficient to fulfill the entire future obligation. But we know that because of swings and the financial crisis and other factors, that's not always the case. So that's what the red is. The red is your unfunded liability payments. Now, where the blue is payments made for benefits accrued in the current period, the red is payments you're making for benefits accrued in prior periods. So think about it as people already got the benefit. We already provided the service. It was a long time ago, and you're still paying for it, right? You're still asking people to pay for it. Again, we can't make this go away, but what we want to do is level that structure out, right? We want to keep it as level as possible so that it's not sloping upward over time. It's a more level, consistent structure so that you have more budget predictability and you're minimizing the exposure to that 6.8%. And you can see right down that the UAL as a percent of your total payments has gone from about 23.5%, which is about where I'd love to see it, to about 44%, which again starts to get higher. It's not the worst. Trust me, I have seen a lot worse. I see 70, 80, 90%. So you're not in a bad place. But we don't want to, this isn't, have to do heart surgery. This is about being methodical and approaching this in ways that is going to allow you to take incremental steps to improve the situation and maintain it going forward. So this is where your unfunded liabilities are as of the most recent report, so the 2021 report. And you can see the green are payments that you've already made, and the blue, you don't really see the PEPRA because it's very small. PEPRA is your new plans. They're young. There isn't much liability in them. Actually, there isn't any right now. But the miscellaneous plan is your classic plan, right? It's an older plan. It has more employees. They have accrued benefits for longer periods of time. Therefore, when swings happen, there's more liability in your miscellaneous plan. But you can see, right, this payment structure is relatively straightforward, right? It's actually pretty good, right? It's declining over time. And your funded percent, again, is about 88%. And you've got a total payment over this period, as it currently stands, of about 1.25 million, which isn't bad. But again, we know that this negative 6.1% year is coming, and that's what this looks like. So and this is important to understanding how CalPERS works. What you see here is what they call a base, right? Each year CalPERS goes in, this is why it takes them a year to do these reports. Each year they go in and they quantify the difference between their base assumptions at the beginning of the year and how they performed at the end of the year, right? And this can be investment performance. It can be, length of life, right? There are a variety of things that they're quantifying, right? Healthcare costs, costs of living, right? There's all kinds of variables that they're trying to quantify the changes over the course of the year. And think about it. The example I always like to use is, if you think about it, 30 years ago, people were accruing pension benefits, and we said people are probably going to live to be about 78 years old. But now we say people are going to live to be 85. Well, that normal contribution back 30 years ago didn't account for that additional time. So by its nature, unfunded liability is created. So there are a variety of things that will create unfunded liability over time. The biggest one is investment performance, as you can see here. And what this red is a base that is forecasting your investment loss, for this most recent period. This is the negative 6.1% year. So now the thing that CalPERS does is they know that this is really hard, right? So these are your liabilities. They're not doing anything. They're just saying, this is what's happened. Here's how we're going to have you pay it, is basically what they're saying, because they know that no agency can just deal with these swings dramatically, right? Just another $2 million out the door isn't going to work for most agencies. So what they do is they spread it out. They amortize it over a fixed period of time. Excuse me. They amortize it out over a fixed period of time. Currently, they're doing it over a 20-year period. right? They used to do it over longer periods of time. You see bases that were 30 years in the past. But again, as these plans start to mature, right, they're recognizing that funds need to be available sooner. So they're shortening these amortization periods. So think of it as a 20-year fixed mortgage, right, that they create. But they know that even those swings, right, taking on a new mortgage every year is a big jump. So what they do, and you can see it here in this structure, in year one, they actually only make you pay 20%. And then in year two, you can see it grows to 40%. And then in year three, it's 60%. And then in year four, it's 80. And then by year five, it's fully amortized. So you're fully amortizing these structures, at year five, and then it goes all the way out, to final maturity.
But can I ask a question? I'm
No,
sorry.
please.
But that all assumes that they make the 6.8% return,
assumes-
correct?
Yeah, well, if they made the 6.8%
On average.
if they made the 6.8% this last year, this base wouldn't be here. There would be your investment performance would just be the blue, right? That you wouldn't have anything new because they achieved exactly what they were supposed to achieve.
But let me ask it a different way. So these new payments are based on the 6.8% extended out to 20 years, correct?
Well, what this is they instead of earning 6.8%, they lost 6.1%.
Right.
So what we've done is we've modeled that difference, and we've said, okay, based upon the way CalPERS amortizes these structures, what will it look like? So this is the loss that you're going to be getting when your report comes in next year.
Okay, but then in 2022, if they don't make 6.8%, then they're just are going to be tacking more onto this.
Yes.
Okay.
And years where they do better, right? It will drop.
Okay.
And the same structure results, right? They still do the same ramping structure. It's just negative or positive. Now, here's the trick. And there's lots of complicated math in CalPERS, but this stuff is actually really, really simple. It's all a time value of money exercise. If you pay principal today, you're not paying interest on it tomorrow. Okay. Now, really simple concept. And you can see this by them they're trying to help you you can see here, you actually don't pay in year one and year two because they want you to have budget predictability, right? They know, right? They've already told the authority how much you're going to pay this next year. So they're saying, we're going to push this out for you. So you have time to prepare for any new basis. And they push it out 2 years. And then they push the principal back so that it's only increasing a little bit each year. But what they're doing, but they're helping. I do believe they are helping. They're trying to help. They're providing predictability, but they're pushing principal back, which is making it more expensive. All right. So that's what we want to do.
But Andrew, by if you look at like 2036, right? I mean, you start getting in trouble by 2025.
Right.
And so if you keep going at what they're predicting, then you're going to be in really big trouble as years come, because I see no more green by 2038. It's all red.
Well, but again, recognize that this is going to fluctuate. So, let's put on the kind of happy hat for a second and say this year they're going to earn 9%, which means that they earned above the 6.8%. The top of this will start to get shaved off because they'll layer in a new base that takes away some of the top. So it's going to be a constant fluctuation over time. That again, if they keep having bad years, this will continue to go up, right? And they push it back so that you have time to prepare for it, right? Which is really important, right? Because if they didn't, people would start, falling over. So they give you time, but they can't give you too much time because again, these are your liabilities and you've committed to your employees that we're going to pay you these things. So they're trying to balance those factors. What we're saying is they're trying to help, but you can layer on top of this and be proactive in terms of how you pay, which will mitigate this exposure. And hopefully the goal is to level it out over time so that you're not dealing with these domes. because that's where you start to have budgetary problems, right? We want to level this structure out more, and we want to, and frankly, we want to mitigate it so that it's not, you don't have these big swings over time. Knowing that we can't control the investment market, but we can take proactive steps to pay into CalPERS to change these structures incrementally each year. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, that's what I mean. I'm sure that's what we all do in all of our cities, right? I mean, in Dublin, our employees are paying more, right? A higher percentage. And we decided that years ago, so that we could try to always have a low unfunded liability.
Right. Exactly. And what's interesting is that most agencies, when you bring up unfunded liabilities, they kind of scratch their heads, right? They're like, we pay the bill. Whatever CalPERS sends, we pay. And again, that's not a bad thing, right? That's what CalPERS and legally you're required to do. But if you can be proactive about it, like Dublin, right, you're going to proactively manage this structure and mitigate that cost, right? 6.8% is really, really expensive. So how do we reduce it as much as possible and manage it proactively? Because that's really the trick over time. And again, I always tell people, this isn't a one and done, right? There are some big moves you can make, but most importantly, this is the apple a day type of exercise, right? I'm not here to tell you I've got a quick solution. I'm here to tell you each year, right, we're going to go through steps and we're going to ask questions based upon where you are fiscally and where your CalPERS reports are and what the forecasts are. And we're going to ask these questions and we're going to determine what steps you can take this year and next year and the year after that. And that's really why, and I'll switch here. This is really why we think about this from a policy perspective, right? Again, staff will come and go, but boards will come and go. But these liabilities are going to be here for the next 50 years, right? And the classic plans will mature and everybody will pass away and those plans will go away. But PEPRA actually, while they've done some changes to accelerate the contributions, you can imagine with PEPRA, the newer plans, in 30 years, when they are relatively large plans, right? You have lots of people who are accruing benefit. There's a financial crisis in 30 years. The same thing will result, right? You will still have unfunded liability. So the question becomes, how do you build a policy that's going to kind of build the annual process when you go into budget to ask yourself the questions, right? And it's not just about the short-term cash flow. It's not just about the long-term cash, mitigation. It's really a spectrum question. And it's a spectrum question every year, right? Where are we, right? How are we fiscally? How are our reserves? Do we have anything set aside to proactively pay, into CalPERS, or don't we, right? There's all kinds of things that, again, from being a finance guy, right? There's all kinds of variables that you're going to be looking at. But we want to make sure we're asking these questions from a pension perspective as well and saying, is there additional resources to make discretionary payments into CalPERS to proactively manage these liabilities because they are so expensive to the authority? So this is really why we're focusing on it from a policy perspective, right? It's about building consensus, but then it's about embedding this discipline into the organization for the long term, so that you have these questions and you're doing it on a go-forward basis. All right, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We will get into this in detail, but I want to hit on a few things. These are kind of the building blocks of the policy that you're all going to get. All right, it's a baseline policy. It's going to be homework. It's really the starting point. We've done this for many agencies, and it's really a good, solid baseline document. But we want to start from this baseline of here are the mitigation strategies that we start with, and then we're going to refine it, based upon the needs of the authority. So these are kind of high-level summaries of what the actions are that are going to be in the policy. The first one is the UAL prepayment. And Tamara, remind me, do you guys make the annual prepayment or do you pay monthly?
Sorry, I couldn't get that off of mute. We do the annual payment.
Perfect. All right. So CalPERS, when they send the bill, they say you're required to pay monthly, right? That's the requirement that CalPERS says you have to pay this amount each month. But if you pay all up front, they'll give you a discount, right? They're going to give you about a 3.3% discount. But in reality, it's not a discount. What they're saying is, if you give us all this money up front, we have more time to invest it. And the assumption is that they are going to earn 6.8%. Okay. And if you run the math out, it's pretty simple, right? It's a time value of money calculation. So it's not really a discount, but it shows the importance of getting dollars into CalPERS so that they can invest and earn, right? Again, yeah, the short-term swings are painful, but if we look at it from a long-term perspective, let's just say they're earning 7.2% over a 25-year period. That's a lot more than the authority can earn by having its reserves sitting in LAIF, right? LAIF, I haven't seen lately where LAIF is at, but it's usually around 50 basis points on a good day is what you're earning on your general reserves. There's no money to be earned. By putting your money in CalPERS can invest, because they're outside of the general government code, they can invest in higher risk assets, right? Which allows them to earn, again, on average 6.8%. But as we know, it also creates more risk, right? Which is why we have a negative 6.1% year. So, but again, that UAL prepayment is a great example of this is why we want to be thinking about how do we proactively get dollars into CalPERS, because they say it's a discount, but really what it is you're getting dollars and they can invest it. And if they have a better year, if they have another 21.3% year, you get a whole lot more than that 3.3% discount. You get a whole lot more than that in general. Granted, if they have a negative 6.1% year, you lose some money. And the next year, the base is going to grow, right? So again, it's a time value of money exercise. And we're trying to balance this over time. So that's the annual prepayment. The next one is from reserves, one-time revenues, and fund surpluses. Now, the short of this one is your reserves are very important, right? You always want to have healthy reserves. And I'm sure you guys work very hard to maintain a healthy reserve balance. But if you have excess, what do you do with it? Again, your reserves are generally sitting in LAIF for something similar. If you have excess in any given year, is there an opportunity to set some of it aside and put it into CalPERS to get you closer because you're mitigating that 6.8% expense? Again, we'll go into more detail, but that's the baseline concept.
So Tamar, I have a question for Tamar really quick.
Yeah.
So we don't pay annually to get the discount?
We do. We pay.
Okay. I wanted to make sure.
Because we have the cash, we have the surplus funds, we have a good cash flow. We've always paid it. I think we pay it right before July 1st is when it's due. That way we get that discount, and one, the discount, and two, it's just one big payment. It makes life easier that way too.
Yeah, that's what we do in Dublin too. We do it so we can get the discount.
Yeah, if we had a cash flow issue, it'd be a totally different story, but we haven't had a cash flow issue in almost a decade now. So okay, thanks. Yeah.
No, and it's a good thing, right? Don't get me wrong. I don't want to suggest that it's not a good thing, right? It is a good thing. They frame it as a discount, but in reality, you're investing earlier. You're putting dollars into that pool sooner, which is good. But again, it shows a pattern that we want to be thinking about and proactively supporting. How do we find dollars to get to CalPERS to get you to your funded target, right? Again, talking about your funded percent. We don't necessarily want to go above that number, but how do we get to that number and keep you there? So that's kind of how many dollars can you get? And then there's base targeting, and we won't really talk about allocation, but base targeting, again, it's like I showed you that one base, the big red base, right? How do we proactively pay this, right? How are we thinking about this each year, right? When you are going into budget, right? You've got all these variables and you say, okay, we're going to set aside $20,000 to make a discretionary payment. You have options in terms of how to do that, right? You can just say, look, just pay this oldest base, the one that's about to mature, or you pay the long one that's going to have interest for the longest period of time. And there's pluses and minuses doing both. Again, that's something that we will help you with, in terms of how do we target and to make sure that, again, we're trying to level the structure over time, and minimize the cost. The fresh start, this number 2, we will dig into this one yet in more detail. But a fresh start is basically a CalPERS offering. What they do is they basically tell agencies, here are all of your bases, right? I showed you that one new base, right? They're all the red. But in reality, it's probably 30 or 40 bases, right? You have lots that come over years and years and years. CalPERS says, look, there's this whole complex structure, but if you want some predictability, you can fresh start the whole thing, right, all those bases, and create one amortization structure. And there are advantages to it. The advantage being, one, you have a fixed payment, right? It's a level payment out to maturity, right? So you're paying $1 value for the next X number of years. And that's the advantage, right? The other advantage is that you're shortening the amortization period, right? Because they shorten the amortization period, so you actually create savings, right? Same interest rate, you're just accelerating your payments and creating a level payment structure. So you're saving dollars in the long term. So there are advantages. The disadvantage of a fresh start is that once you lock in with CalPERS, you're stuck with it. So if you need budget flexibility in year 7, say, you can't get it from CalPERS. You're legally required to make the fresh start payment. So we always tell people, a fresh start is a good strategy if you're interested in going down that path, but you can do this informally, right? You can base target and make payments. You could call up CalPERS and say, we want to make this payment every year for the next 8 years. And the same structure would result. Again, it's just a time value of money exercise. So we tell people, if you do it informally, you preserve flexibility in your organization, while still achieving the same ends. So fresh starts are there. We will talk more about it, and I will show you in detail as we move forward. New sources of revenue, really what I'm going to leave you here with just for today is, as you are thinking about any type of study, right? Any type of rate study that you are looking at, you want to make sure that any consultant is looking at the long-term forecasts for your unfunded liabilities, right? I've shown you the kind of the dome shape. If they aren't aware that these things happen, any of those future studies, will immediately be behind if they don't take into account the swings that occur. So we want to make sure that anytime you are looking at these types of things, you're being proactive in terms of accounting for these fluctuations. More detail there, but for now, that's kind of the core concept. Refinance, actually, let me step back for a second. The pay down box is really, these are incremental steps. These are steps that you're going to take internally every year. You're going to ask questions, and you're going to say, do we have money? They are the most affordable because it's your dollars and you're using them as efficiently as possible. The refinance box is about engaging outside of the organization, right? So you're finding other mechanisms to utilize dollars, to pay down 6.8%, debt. The first one is the savings from debt refundings. I'm sure in Dublin, this is probably, you guys probably have plenty of debt. The concept here is, as a general rule.
Did you say we have plenty of debt?
Most municipalities have.
We're pretty good. We're pretty good.
We're pretty good too.
We like to pay as we go.
That's good. All right. No, that's fantastic. Well, so the idea here, and again, this is something that will go in the policy because it is a long document. But again, it's probably not applicable immediately. But the concept is, when you borrow money as a tax exempt entity, right, as a public agency, you're borrowing tax exempt. So if you're going to refinance, let's just say interest rates, you borrowed at 4% and interest rates are now at 3%. You can refinance. And the general rule of thumb as a municipal advisor is, you take those savings pro rata, right? You reduce your payments, every payment period, rather than taking the cash out up front. You just reduce the overall borrowing. However, if you think about the fact that you have 6.8% debt, you can take out cash, right? Refinance that structure, take out cash, and make an additional discretionary payment to CalPERS and reduce your 6.8 exposure. Now, again, depending on the interest rate environment, that might not work. The environment might not be appropriate, or you might not have debt outstanding. But again, we want to ask the questions each year. Do we have debt? Is it going to be refundable this year? Is this something we want to talk about, right? It doesn't require action, right? Again, you guys, again, as electeds, right, you can't commit a future, board to certain decisions. You can encourage and support and build patterns, but ultimately it's their decision. So what we're not trying to force a decision. What we're trying to do is say, ask the question, right, and make the decision at that point informed. So that's the savings from debt refundings. The capital financing is an interesting one. Again, think about this from you're saving money to buy, a fleet, equipment in the fleet. right? That's a standard practice. You save money. That money, while you're saving it, is sitting in LAVTA, right? It's earning 50 basis points. And you save over a period of time. So it's just kind of sitting, the money's just sitting there. The question is as a tax exempt entity, you can borrow tax exempt rates and finance those things at 100%, right? Borrow low, and instead of sitting on that cash, right, earning nothing, make additional discretionary payments, right? The economics, again, depends on the environment, but the economics tend to work, right? And it's usually much more advantageous to finance your whatever the capital is that you're working on, and take the cash and use it to make additional discretionary payments. Again, this is one of those things that you ask the questions and look at, how do we do this year, right? We want to optimize and make sure that we're using capital as efficiently as possible, because 6.8% debt, again, is really expensive. Pension refinancing, I will go into this. This is briefly, this is the most expensive approach. And this is the last thing that we would ever look at. But it's also the place you can make the biggest move, right? You're basically borrowing money in the capital markets to pay your pensions down. Again, the idea here being is that even though when you borrow money for this purpose, it's taxable, right? So it's more expensive, right? It's often, and even now with interest rates climbing, it's still more affordable than 6.8% debt. So again, this is kind of the last piece of the puzzle. I'll show you a visual just so that you have an idea. But again, it's just really just for visual purposes. But before I go there, I want to show you this stabilized. The 115 trust. Are you guys aware of the 115 trust and what it is?
Yeah, we have a $40 million one.
Fantastic. That's
And
perfect.
yeah, LAVTA just established ours last year.
Yep.
So
And
we
I
know
just
it as
asked-
well.
All right. So here's the thing. A lot of consultants will tell you, put money with us instead of in CalPERS. For me, that's a horse race. It's not how ultimately you're going to benefit. From a policy perspective, what we want to do is we want to get your dollars into CalPERS to whatever your funded target is, right? If you say it's 85%, you want to get dollars proactively into CalPERS until you hit 85%. And then anything above that, right, you still are responsible for 100%. Above that 85%, you start putting money into a 115 trust. Now, the reason that a 115 trust is powerful is that when you put money with CalPERS, right, it's gone, right? And if they have 2 great years and they're super funded, right, they have more money than they need, you can't get the money back. But if the money's sitting in a 115 trust and you go above, your target threshold between the 2 plans, between CalPERS and your 115 trust, not only can you use that for unfunded liabilities, you can also use that money to pay normal costs. So the power is that the 115 trust gives you flexibility to build that reserve and really treat the 115 trust as a kind of a buffering mechanism between your general fund and your CalPERS liabilities. Again, you're going to get your swings, and you ultimately want, between your 115 trust and CalPERS, you want to be at 100%, or maybe even a little above it. But you want that 115 trust there to, when CalPERS has a bad year, to flow money out and into CalPERS to get you up to 85%, right? And you have that flexibility where if things go up, CalPERS goes up, your 115 trust goes up, you have excess. Instead of just paying your unfunded liabilities and leveling that structure, you take the excess and you pay normal costs, which frees up dollars in your general fund. So it's really, it creates that mechanism to balance between, again, the swings that CalPERS is going to experience and your general fund, which is ultimately where the 115 trust, we think, becomes very powerful. So that's the kind of the core concept. Really, from there, it's a question of how do you fund it, right? It sounds like you guys are already on the path. That is fantastic. There are a couple ways we think about it. One, again, is, again, from reserves and fund surpluses. Again, that's it. Once you're at your target fund percent, putting additional reserves into 115 trust is great. As a general rule for me, when I think about, the investment performance of 115 trusts, I think they're going to earn about what CalPERS is earning, right? Some consultants will tell you, we're going to beat CalPERS. If they're beating CalPERS, it means that they're farther out on the risk profile than where CalPERS is, which means that yes, they can beat CalPERS, but they can also lose more money than CalPERS. So for me, it's not a horse race. I tend to just see, look, they're about the same in terms of kind of the long-term investment structure that we're trying to manage. What I want to do is have two pools so that I can proactively manage this overarching structure rather than trying to say, I'm going to do better or worse, right? That's, again, you can, right? With a 115 trust, they do have different investment strategies that you can undertake. You can be more conservative, you can be more aggressive. But again, as a general rule, I'm not trying to go down that path. I'm trying to build a buffer. So that again, the general fund isn't exposed to these long-term swings, because that starts to hamper operations long-term. The other thing is contributing to 115 trust as a percent of your normal cost. Again, if we really think back to kind of how unfunded liabilities are created, right? They're actually created by the the miscalculation way back when that liability was initially accrued. So is there a way to think about, if your funded target is 85%, can you tack on an additional amount on top of that normal contribution that's being made and set that money aside each year into a 115 trust, knowing that the whole intent is for it to grow long-term, right? Again, we want to recognize that these swings are going to happen. We want to create a buffer. So there's different ways to approach funding the 115 trust. And we'll get into the mechanics of which ones make the most sense. But again, it's really about managing both CalPERS and the 115 trust really as one kind of comprehensive unit as we move forward. I threw a whole bunch at you. Questions?
Nope, it makes sense so far.
No, I mean, our cities sounds like maybe a little different approach, but
We have the 115 too. We put money in there, but we also have money in our reserves that we could pay. We're only at $17 million in funded liability, and we can pay that if we wanted to, but we've just chosen to hold on to it just in case.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And those are the factors, right? Each year is going to be different, right?
Yeah. And every city is different too. I mean, like,
Right.
Exactly.
you have different projects coming forward, or you have different, things that we're forecasting and things that we're doing. But
right.
I think we all try to run a tight ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have,
exactly.
I think we're at 180 million, but we have a police force. And so the safety employees are the big piece of that.
Yes, they are. Speaking of 3% of 50.
Yep.
Right. Very, very rich plans. All right. So again, we will get into kind of the mechanics of the policy itself, but again, that's kind of the key principle that we're going to embed into the policy. We can talk about it, we can refine it, we can change it. That we're not wedded. This is just the baseline. The last one is refinancing savings. Again, if we were to do a pension refinancing, we always say, if you're going to do that, don't just take those savings and go spend them other places. Diligently set aside some of those savings each year into a 115 trust so that you're building that reserve. Again, taking that move is a big one. So if you're going to do it, make sure that not only are you really thoughtful about it, but you're also prepared to take savings and put them aside to build that 115 trust reserve. So we'll get into more detail there. All right, so baseline refinancing, again, this is just very high level, just so that you get a sense of what this might look like. What I've shown you here is basically three scenarios. You can see you've got the pie on the far right. I've estimated out this next year, and you can see the pie on the right. You've got we're anticipated to be about 77% funded. And then what I've done is I've said I'm going to refinance additional 16%, so it gets you essentially to 93% funded. Right. Again, that's just a bit of just a stab in the dark, but give you a sense. And what you can see here is that on the right-hand side, the table, the current amortization structure is the bars going across. The light blue are things that we refinance in this scenario, and the gray remain outstanding. And we replace the light blue with one of these three structures. Right? The red is a 10-year, the green is a 15-year, and the blue is a 20-year. And you can see down here at the bottom, we're basically refinancing 1.2 million. And these interest rates, which are high, again, they're taxable. And these are, again, directional right now. We didn't get too far into the detail because I don't want to, this isn't a pitch for refinancing. This is just give you a sense. But you can see over time, the way these structures play out, there is savings here. And really because you're creating a more level structure, if we use a 20-year, right, you can see all these blue bars above this those are savings, out into the future, right? You wouldn't be paying those. So again, it creates more predictability if you go down this type of path. But again, you want to be setting aside those savings because again, they're, otherwise they can get lost into the general fund and you're back kind of where you were before. So there's a lot of discipline that needs to go into this type of approach. But even in this interest rate environment, you can see this is really the difference between, a taxable rate and the 6.8%. And a lot of this is because this new base is very large and it goes out essentially 23 years. So we're shortening the amortization period and we're lowering the interest rate. So it gives you more predictability, it gives you more stability, and it lowers your costs long term. So this is something that we can dig into further if you guys are interested. But again, just for now, it's just to give you a sense of how this works. And this is what a post refinancing structure looks like. So again, this red bar here is what we were looking at. This is what it looks like with a 20-year financing. And you can see this is the unfunded liabilities for your miscellaneous that stay outstanding. The red is that base, what's left of that base, right? And you can see it kind of grows. That's that ramping structure that's still there. And this is the refinancing. So again, this does give you more predictability. It's a big jump and it gets you to your funded target or above more quickly. And then it also potentially gives you a mechanism to set aside dollars into a 115 trust. But again, that's depending on all the other variables that we're looking at, in any given year, whether it's this year, next year. These are the types of questions we would ask is, what is this structure? And again, how do we create more predictability on a go-forward basis, knowing that it's going to change over time? And you can see here, that the savings in this scenario are a little over $500,000. Again, this isn't a large structure, compared to some, we might look at, right? Again, the cities that they're going to be much larger. This is relatively small. So again, this is a private placement. It wouldn't be, a large transaction, but again, it could be a big jump if there weren't other strategies that were working or going to get you where you wanted to be in terms of the funded percent. So that's kind of the overarching structure. And then this last slide here is, I just want to show you, this is just accelerating that base. So this is just saying, I'm going to make additional payments ahead of time. So instead of waiting 2 years and then doing the ramping structure, basically what I did was I went out and calculated, what if I put dollars in ahead of time, right? There's no refinancing. I'm just putting in more dollars sooner. And you can see, in this case, you don't save a lot of money. You save $200,000. But you can see that structure does start to level out sooner. Is this really the optimum strategy? No, of course not. But I wanted to show you kind of how these things start to play out as you incrementally start taking steps, right? How do we think about making payments? What is the strategy? Because each year this structure is going to fluctuate. We want to just keep diligently saying, okay, what's the right approach this year? How much should we be putting in? How should we be paying it into CalPERS? Or ideally, we're perfectly fine where we are with CalPERS, right? We want to shift some money to CalPERS to level our amortization structures, but otherwise we want to be putting money into the 115 trust, right? That's the ideal place that you would be. But again, we want to get you to that funded target first. So that's going to be one of our first goals, is kind of setting that funded percent target. And then we'll start talking about some of the other mechanics as we move forward. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. All right. So again, this is basically, just a summary of kind of all the key pieces. This is meeting number 1, right? This is really just an overview to get everybody level set. Step 2 is going to be, as I said, I'm going to send Tamara the baseline policy, and I'll let her share it. But it's a baseline policy. We will have subsequent meetings to kind of dig in and talk about the mechanics of the policy itself. Again, this will be a couple meetings, right? This was really just kind of level setting, kind of what this is, what we're talking about. Then we're going to start digging into the policy itself, probably 2 or 3 meetings through this process. At the end of the process, the goal is to have a policy that everybody's proud of, that you are confident to vote in. We will package that up, give you a staff report, and assuming that the board is inclined, at the end of the whole process, you will have an unfunded liability management policy. Now, through that process, we can also look at some of these other strategies, whether it's looking at your CIP, looking at refinancing. Those things can be on the table, but ultimately it's your decision as to whether you want to look at those things or not. Again, we will be here, either way, pushing the policy forward. A lot of the times what I will do is I will show you scenarios, on a financial model, so that you can kind of see how things play out. Again, if you're base targeting, if you're, shifting dollars from your CIP to other places, right? Or if you're doing a refinancing, right? You bring me kind of where you're at and what you're thinking, and then I can help you model it out and kind of give you ideas of how this, this policy is going to play out over time. If you want to take actions early, we can, but if not, that's part of the process. So that really summarizes my presentation. That's really the heart of it. I'm happy to answer questions, if you have any.
So I guess I have a question. I represent Pleasanton, and we've made a conscious decision not to fund ahead of time, because once you give it to CalPERS, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Either they make money or they lose money, but it's gone. And so we've been funding a 115 trust,
Sure,
setting risks, comparable to CalPERS. And the place where it is has been beating CalPERS generally. So our initial setup was, I think, about 26 million, and we're about 42 million now. With the idea that once in a couple of years, when our general fund can't meet the payments without cutting services, we would begin to draw out of the 115 to make the payment without affecting services.
sure.
In the meantime, we have control of the money. So if we had an earthquake or something, we would just not take the money from our, the employees and the general fund to make the CalPERS payment, but we would use the 115 trust to make the payment, and then we would have money for, whatever
Right.
major catastrophe we were dealing with. So I'm kind of curious. I just, it sounds like maybe I'm not, I misread you, but you're really a proponent of paying as much as you can as you go.
What I would say is that you guys can pick the funded percent. The funded percent could be 65%, right? For me, it's about setting a target to say we are going to proactively pay into CalPERS up to X, right? That is our objective. And then anything above that, we will contribute into a 115 trust. That way you're balancing the risk and reward, right? And again, you could, some agencies are going to say we want CalPERS up to 90%. Some are going to say 70%. That's a variable that I think both are correct, right? That's something that you can decide. For me, it's really the discipline of how do you build up to a target and then maintain that target, right? And then build the 115 trust to balance those things so that these bases aren't swinging and creating this really expensive liability. So yes, I am into proactively paying, but not necessarily into CalPERS, right? That's just that's one factor in this overarching strategy that we want to be thinking about.
Okay, versus instead of aggressively paying into CalPERS, you could aggressively pay into the 115 and then use that to make the payments.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, it's, again, if I go back, to, let's go way back here, right? If I go back here and say, your funded target, well, we know it's going to be about 77%. If we said 75%, from a policy perspective, you're there, right? So now any excess money goes to a 115 trust. That doesn't mean stop, right? That means 115 trust, right? And what we do from a 115 trust perspective is not only do we say, start building, but we say that between CalPERS and the 115 trust, you need to have a cap, right? Let's just, for argument's sake, say 110%. Because again, if CalPERS has a good year, 115 trusts are going to have a good year. So let's just imagine that you're at 95%. CalPERS shoots up, your 115 trust shoots up, you're at 112. When you have a cap of 110%, that 2% is what you use to pay normal cost, right? And you give relief to the general fund, right? That's a reward for the discipline, but because you don't want to be sitting on that money for too long, but you want to have a framework to think about how do we pay and, you know, how do we manage this 115 trust? So that's one thing. But then on the other swing, right, CalPERS has a bad year. 115 trusts are going to have a bad year too, right? I mean, it's kind of just the nature of it. Might not be as bad, maybe it's worse. So again, if you're at 100% between the two, you have a bad year, your CalPERS drops below your funded target of 75%, money comes out of the 115 trust, gets you back up to that 75%, levels your base out. So again, you're fully amortizing that structure so that you're not accruing that additional interest cost, right? And then you're, again, working back to rebuild the 115 trust.
Okay.
But it's really about trying to mitigate that exposure to that 6.8%.
Okay.
I know, lots of variables.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it sounds like Melissa and Dublin, they've had plenty of discussions. We've certainly had plenty of discussions about, you know, how to deal with ours.
Yeah. And like I said, we're all, you know, all the cities are different and we all carry different risk as well. So we prepare how we feel we need to prepare. But yeah, I mean, we don't have a ton of money in our 115. But like you said, you just don't want it sitting there. And so that's probably why. But I mean, you can also look, since I know you're really interested, Andrew, you can go at a glance view of California cities, and it's provided by California Local, and it tells you kind of like the overall general fund reserves, debt, liquidity, revenue trends, pension, and it gives you a rating on each city, which is actually kind of pretty cool throughout the state of California.
I should know that. What is it?
If you give me your email, I'll forward it to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll shoot you an email. Yeah, that's weird. I should know that. There's always tools that I'm discovering. So yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, it sounds useful because I'm usually digging into the CalPERS reports to figure it all out.
Yeah, it's like auditor.california.gov, and it's
okay.
local. But just I'll send it to give me your email and I'll send it to you. Tomorrow
Right,
I can forward it to you, or vice versa.
Thank you. So this is the approach. Again, next step is going to be I'm going to send Tamara the baseline policy and this presentation so that you have it for reference purposes. But really, it's going to be up to you guys how you want to engage. In this kind of process. You can be fully engaged. Nose down, reading every word, or I can do that with Tamara. Right. Again, that's ultimately up to you guys how you want to move forward. Obviously you're going to want to read it at some point. But it's up to you as to how deep in the process you are. You guys all get to decide. I'm really just going to help facilitate the process and hopefully guide you down a healthy path to craft the policy. So
Andrew, as far as timeline goes, we definitely want to do this in as few meetings as possible and as quickly as possible because Kathy's actually leaving us soon and there's the holidays and all the other good stuff. So we'd like to get it kind of condensed, I guess, as much as we can.
Of course, we can get this done in 3 weeks max.
Okay.
It's really up to you. I'm happy to accelerate this as quickly as you want to do it. Obviously, you want a little time to think about it.
Exactly. Okay.
Do you need anything from us today, like any parameters or?
No, at this point, I'm going to send the baseline policy and you can kind of read through it and get comfortable with it. You'll see where the kind of the holes are and where you have questions. You're going to be like, oh yeah, we need to answer that question. And then when we reconvene, we will go through the policy in detail and talk about the mechanics and kind of where to set the funding thresholds, right? All those little pieces. But it should go pretty quick. You guys are very familiar, so you're way ahead of a lot of agencies that I work with. So I think this should go pretty quick. You guys have a lot of familiarity, so I'm not worried. You'll read this and be like, okay, I get it. And then it's just going to be a debate of do we set it at 75% or 85% or something else, right? And how much should we put into the 115 trust over time? It's going to be those types of decisions, honestly, that I think we'll have a good discussion about. But it should be pretty straightforward.
Okay. Tamara,
Okay.
do we have in the 115 trust now, or the equivalent of it?
I'm sorry, what was the question? How much do we have?
Yeah, what's the balance?
Oh, it's just over 200,000. It's not very high because we've only made a couple payments.
Okay,
One last year, one this year. I just pulled that report the other day and I can't remember with the investment and all that, but it should just be just over 200,000.
okay.
It's very tiny to start.
All right.
But if you look at that, I mean, compared to your unfunded liabilities, right? That's okay, right? It's a good start. So now, granted, next year it's not as good a start, but yeah, that's okay. We'll get there.
Okay. Anything
All right.
else, Melissa?
No, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah. And you're going to
Thank
send
you.
the presentation to Tamara so we can get a copy of it?
Yes, I was in the presentation and the base policy.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
You
We'll
too.
see you next month, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yes, you will. All right. Have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's move on to item number 7. Preview of the upcoming agenda items for the next Finance Committee meeting. I think we already know what one is.
Yes, so pension liability will be one. Will probably take up the majority of the meeting, but we also should have, if all goes well, we should have our ACFR presented next month. Not 100% sure where the auditors on that. They stopped asking me for stuff, but they haven't sent me draft numbers yet, so I'm not sure where they are, but they should be pretty close to at least sending me the draft, I would think. And then November and December, we, depending on what we've got going on with the pension and everything, we usually actually cancel those just because they tend to fall at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then as of right now, the January plan is for the minutes, the treasurer's report, and our legislative program. Hopefully Jennifer Yeamans will be back and feeling strong by then, in order to get that together. Most recent update, she's thinking now that she won't be back till November, but it all depends on, she got her last chemo treatment. So last week, she's just, and now it's just getting her strength back up. So that's what she can't predict, understandably. And then February will be minutes and treasurer's report and probably some resolutions for some funding sources, but we'll kind of see how timing works this year because it's not as predictable as it used to be. And that's it.
Okay,
All
thank you.
right.
Matters initiated. Melissa, anything?
I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
I don't have anything either. So the next meeting, October 17th, 2022. And if there's no other comments, then we'll
Can I-
adjourn here at
Kathy,
3:13.
can I just interrupt for 2 seconds?
Sure.
It'll be at 2:00, just so you guys know.
At 2?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you for the reminder. Because
Yeah, why did we move the time?
What was that?
Why did we move the time? I think you told me, but I don't remember.
It's just because we have the guest speaker.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. With that, thank you.
I think she's saying we're adjourning, but you keep
Okay.
breaking up.
I thought I was the only one who was missing what you guys were saying. Yeah, it looks like she froze.
Okay. Well, I think she adjourned the meeting at 3:14.
We'll call it that. All right.
All right. Thanks, ladies. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.